Hello all, welcome back to your Algebra 1 notes. We're going to go ahead and label this one Simplifying Radicals. You might know these as square roots. So we worked a little bit on this before, and we've worked with some examples that are pretty straightforward, such as the square root of 64. And we know we're saying, hey, the square root of 64, that's 8, because 8 squared is 64, or 8 times 8 is 64. Such as the square root of 144. I know that to be 12. 12 times 12 is 144. And as a reminder, you need to be able to go up to 15. So I'm going to say the square root of 225 is 15. So those are pretty straightforward. However, sometimes we might run into a number such as the square root of 30. All right? And the square root of 30, I'm thinking of numbers times itself that equal 30. And I can't quite get there. However, I do know that the square root of 25 is 5. And the square root of 36 is 6. So it's somewhere between 5 and 6. It's going to be around 5.5. So what I'm actually going to do here is open up our calculator. And I'm going to say 5.5 times 5.5. That's 30.25. So that's close, but it's not exactly accurate. So what I'm looking for is okay, the number times itself that's going to give me 30. That ends up to be this number, 5.47722.557, and keeps going and it keeps going. So this is what we actually call, and I'm going to say the square root of 30 is approximately equal to 5.4772, and this is what I'm going to call an irrational number. And you might have heard this term before, something like pi, where these numbers don't really end. They keep going and they keep going and they keep going. But we don't really want to work with these irrational numbers. We don't want an approximation. What we would like is we would actually like an exact answer. So exact answers. And how we write them is that we write them a little bit differently. Let me go ahead and exclamation mark there. So, for example, on this, I'm going to work with the square root of 48. Now, I know there's a square root of 49 is 7, but I don't quite know what the square root of 48 is. However, 48 has a really cool factor. 48 has a factors of 16 times 3. So I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to factor that. And what's so cool about this one is that the square root of 16 is a number that I know. I know that the square root of 16 is 4. So what I can actually do is I can bring that out of the radical, and I'm going to say 4 times the square root of 3, and this is going to go ahead, and this is my exact answer. You can go ahead and put your pencils down for a second. I'm going to prove it to you, and I'm going to say 48 and square root, that's about 6.928. We're going to remember that number for a second, and I'm going to clear my calculator, and I'm going to say 4 times the square root of 3, and I'm going to say equals, and hey, it's the exact same number. So when we're going ahead and we are simplifying our square roots, we want to make sure that we're pulling out any possible factors that have perfect roots. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rewrite these numbers that we care about so much over on the side here, and hopefully these are somewhere in your notes. But we, of course, care about 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, 100, 121, 144, 169, 196, and 225. And these are all of our perfect squares. I'm sorry. So these are the factors that we're going to care about. Our perfect squares. So let's go ahead, let's try one more here. Actually, we have a few more, but we're going to try one together here. I'm looking at the square root of 54, and I know that 54 has a whole bunch of factors. However, the factors that I care about are 9 times 6. And I care about this factor of 9 times 6 because 9 is over here on my perfect square list. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this 9 out of the radical. And I know that the square root of 9 is 3. And so my final answer is 3 square root 6. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to highlight that for you. And we're going to try one more together. The square root of 50. And you guys might know this. I know 25 times 2. Hey, that 25 there absolutely has a perfect square that we can go ahead and pull out, meaning that my answer is 5 times the square root of 2. 5 root 2 is how we say that. So these are pretty simple because what's inside the radical is already simplified for us. However, you might have something that's a little bit more advanced. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 8. And order of operations says that we have to do parentheses first. Now, there are invisible parentheses inside this radical, meaning that I need to do everything inside here before I go ahead and work with any square roots. So inside those parentheses, I have an exponent. I'm going to do that first. So I have 6 squared, which is 36, minus 4 times 2 times negative 8. Okay, now I'm going to work with my multiplication. Actually, I'll keep this color here. So I'm going to do this multiplication right here. And I actually have a negative times a negative, which ends up being a positive. So I have 36 positive, 4 times 2, that's 8. So negative 8 times negative 8, that's a positive 64. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do this operation in here. So I have 36 plus 64. I have to go ahead and do the operation inside the radical, which is going to leave me with 120. All right, now that I have just one number in there, I can go ahead and I can think of my factors of 120. Now, the factors of 120, there's a whole bunch of them, but the one that I care about is 4 times 30. And the reason that I care about that 4 times 30 is because this 4 is a perfect square, meaning that I can bring it outside the radical, and I have 2 root 30 as my final answer for this one. Okay, what I'm going to ask is that I'm going to give you a problem, and I'm going to ask you to try it on your own. We're going to call this you try. So go ahead, copy down this problem. The square root of 7 squared minus 4 times 1 times 9. Go ahead, pause the video, try it on your own. Okay, hopefully you've come back and you're just checking your work here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to do everything inside the radical because I know that there's parentheses in there. So I have 49 minus 4 times 1 times 9. Okay, that's going to leave me with the square root of 49 minus 36. All right, that's the square root of 13. 13 is actually a prime number, so I can't go ahead and I can't simplify this anymore. So my exact answer and how I'm going to leave this is the square root of 13. Final answer. Now I want you to go ahead, I want you to make a special note here. I'm going to do this in red. Is that, note this, you cannot take the square root of a negative number. So something like the square root of negative 36 has no solution for right now. Hint, hint. All right, thanks all for following along. You are all done with your notes.